now the current Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina.
Yep, it's the 93rd Lieutenant Governor, first female Republican Lieutenant Governor. Right, that's a big deal.
Some people know a lot about you, others don't know quite so much. So everybody in the room knows that you are the Lieutenant Governor.
Yep.
Tell a little bit about where you come from.
So I come from the business world. Much like Donald Trump, I decided that we needed more business people in office. And so, he was really inspiring to me. I don't know, I think this keeps cutting out. I'm sorry, guys. But he was really inspiring to me. When I saw him coming down that escalator, I was like, wow, this is amazing. We're going to have a businessman at the helm. And this was something I've been saying, because I spent my entire life in the business world, just like Donald Trump. And I kept telling my husband time and time again, government is getting in business's way. And we cannot continue to keep going down. Do we want to go this way?
This is the better one.
Let's see. Is this the better one? You guys hear me better? Good. So that's when I really got involved and wanted to be more involved in what was happening. And because of that, I met the governor, Governor McMaster. He was the lieutenant governor and ascended. And I am also the first lieutenant governor ever elected with a governor. And so if you ever hear Governor McMaster talk, he said he picked me himself, picked me out of the business community. He wanted somebody that was a business person with a fresh set of eyes that could come into government and kind of take a fresh look at what was happening. And so that's how this all happened. He called me down to Columbia. He asked me if I would come down and talk to him. And so I went in my husband's office. I said, wow, David, the governor has asked me to come down to Columbia. And he said, well, whatever he asked you, just say no. Because he thought for sure it'd be we were going to sit on another board and commission. I have 3 children. My youngest, Jackson, is here. Just graduated high school a few weeks ago. Super proud mom. I'm going to be an empty nester now. And to my surprise, he had asked me to run as his lieutenant governor. So when I got back in the car, I called David and told him. He got really quiet for a minute, and then he said, "What did you say?" And I said we would talk about it. And I have been so honored to be your lieutenant governor now. 2 terms. I'm in my 7th year. Getting to know the people of South Carolina. My first year, I traveled around the state a lot. My dad used to always say, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Do a lot more listening than you do talking, and that's what I've done. I've worked with businesses, and I've worked with parents, and I've worked with organizations and tried to be accessible to everybody I can to make a difference in our state and work alongside the governor.
Okay. Let's play off that question, Governor. Did you find that coming from the business community gave you a different, I would argue, much needed perspective in the ability to solve problems?
Yes, I do. President Trump talks a lot about this, right? His business perspective. Now, I'm an accountant by trade. My husband should say you should feel sorry for him because he says I can make a penny cry. But President Trump looked at everything with business first. President Trump is promises kept, promises made, promises kept. And so when he went out there, he said, we're going to make this America first, right? We want this America first agenda to happen. And he used business perspective, right? He said, what do you have to do? You have to unleash corporate America. You got to let American businesses thrive. And how are you going to do that? Well, just like President Trump here in South Carolina, we started talking about getting rid of useless regulations, right? And then, the governor went through his cabinets and said, hey, I want you to look through everything and get rid of whatever is going to stop businesses from growing. President Trump initially said, for every 1 regulation you put in place, we're going to take away 2. Now he says, for every 1 regulation you put in place, we're going to take away 10. And I would venture to say, for every regulation we have, they should all be sunsetted. And we should have the General Assembly look at which ones are even relevant anymore. And how do they line up to the things happening today? And that would make our businesses run a lot smoother.
Is there a single practice or principle that you've kind of adhered to? I mean, I know that it's a multitude and multifaceted things, but is there one single practice or principle that you've tried to carry from the private sector into your role as Lieutenant Governor?
So in my role as Lieutenant Governor, I tried to look at everything through business eyes, right? How do we offer good customer service to the people of South Carolina? How do we work efficiently? You know, President Trump came up with a great term. I used to call it just, how do we become more efficient? President Trump called it Doge. How many of you think we should be bringing Doge to South Carolina? I heard the GOP had a great meeting yesterday. Congratulations, talking about Doge. Great job. You know, I was with President Trump. I was invited to the White House about a month and a half ago. My time comes all together. And I met with Representative Doge because I wanted to figure out what we could do at a state level to see what some of the things that they were doing to improve on the federal level. You know, and it's really all about leveraging technology and leveraging, you know, AI and making sure that we're working on all cylinders. You know, David and I, when we had a good year in business, we didn't say, oh, well, good, we don't need to change anything. We had a good year, right? We always looked at how to improve what we did. And so that's what I've been doing, working with business, sitting down with them and saying, what are we doing good? What do we need to change? Let us know that. And that's what President Trump has done. President Trump has went out to businesses and said, let me help you. Let me unleash the power of energy. Let us make sure that we are energy independent, and that's a national security issue. And I don't think anybody thought of it that way before President Trump talked about it.
Normally, people at the state level would want nothing to do with bringing something from the federal government. You mentioned Doge. Are there other things that President Trump has implemented at the federal level that you'd like to see the state of South Carolina embrace?
Yes. So, you know, President Trump has talked about unleashing the power of energy, right? That's become a national security issue to this country. And so when President Trump was here for the Palmetto Bowl, I happened to be with him, and this is when he was running. And I said to the president, I said, Mr. President, I talk to great conservatives all the time around our state, and they want to know, you know, what are you going to do on day one? What are you going to do on day two? He said, let me tell you, on day one, I'm going to close down our southern border. Nobody's getting into this country. He said, and number two, we're going to drill, baby, drill. We need to make sure that we could produce energy to keep moving, right? We saw what happened in Germany. The Green Party got control of Germany. They got rid of all the nuclear. And then what happened? Germany's GDP dropped, first time in German history, because energy has to be affordable and reliable. So this year, the General Assembly, listening to businesses, right? Because 2 years ago, we almost had a rolling blackout here in our state. And they said, we have to deal with energy. Energy has to be on top of mind for everybody. We have to get base load up. So we're working with those same federal principles to say, if we want to keep growing, if you want your energy bills to stay affordable and reliable, then we got to put forth our best foot with energy, and that's what President Trump is doing too. What
has been some of the biggest changes? You've been Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina during the Biden administration. You're now with the Trump administration. Walk us through some of the complications that the Biden presidency you guys kind of inherited or had to deal with as a comparison to Trump's administration.
Well, Ken, this is very easy. The difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration is that President Trump cares about all of us, and President Biden cared about nobody but himself. And we see that every single day with what President Trump is doing, right? He's investing money in our workforce. He's making sure there's a level playing field for our businesses and our workers. He cares about the American people. The Biden administration, they didn't. They didn't care about us. You could see that every day because they left our southern border wide open, bringing in fentanyl and human trafficking. And we've seen in South Carolina now the deadly effects of what has happened. We saw a huge sting happen in Charleston. Thank God for our law enforcement here in South Carolina. I will tell you, we have the best law enforcement in the entire country. You know, during the Biden administration, they pretty much put a muzzle on ICE. They didn't let them go out and do their job. They weren't collecting illegals. They weren't even finding the drug dealers, the human traffickers. They weren't doing anything. But I will tell you, I talk to Chief Keel all the time. He's our head of SLED, our chief of SLED. And he told me that even during those Biden years, when Biden wasn't calling on anybody to do anything, they stood ready to stand with ICE. Anytime ICE needed something, South Carolina stood ready for them. And so those are some of the biggest things that I think impacts everybody and that has touched all of our lives, is the fact that we now know that when President Biden said, oh no, we need new laws to close our southern border, we all knew we just needed a new president, and that president was President Trump.
The two issues that Trump historically polls well on is the economy and immigration.
Yeah.
If you look at some of the results of the past election, immigration and the economy were probably the drivers of why he got elected president. Everybody in the room lives in the economy in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people don't believe immigration is that important to their daily lives. Explain or elaborate why you think it is.
So, I see it maybe from a different angle. I think we all know what everybody talked about. President Trump talked about immigration because he talked about the horrible things that were coming across the southern border. But things that we see every day, not just in South Carolina, but in every state, is kind of those collateral effects of what's happening, right? I was at a school 2 weeks ago in the upstate. 50% of the students in that school did not speak English. And so, you have to wonder what the effects of that are on the other children in the room, right? Like are they learning to where they need to be? What are we doing? What is the amazing burden it's putting on infrastructure, right? We are just not prepared for that. Exactly. Teachers. You have to look at housing, all these things that we were not prepared for that kind of just stays untalked about, but we all know it. And we all see it and we feel it in our everyday lives. And President Trump's big, beautiful bill, do not let the Democrats fool you. When he talks about cutting Medicaid, he's cutting Medicaid for illegals. He's not cutting Medicaid for Americans. He's cutting Medicaid for illegals.
What steps have you personally taken as part of the McMaster administration to combat illegal immigration?
So when President Trump was in office for his first term, President Trump called on South Carolina to send our SC National Guard down to the border to help protect the border. And without hesitation, we sent our men and women down there, and they proudly were down there. Governor McMaster went down there to shake their hands, and he said that all of the men and women that were serving for South Carolina, they would have stayed as long as they needed them because they were so proud to do what they're doing. What we did on a state level, and thank you so much, I see we have some of our delegation in the room. We made sure that there were no sanctuary cities here in South Carolina, right? We have, I can't say it enough, and I've said it a million times, I'll say it a million times more. All law enforcement is tip-top. And, a lot of times we hear, I get asked questions all the time. You do too, on your radio show, right? I've had people say, well, why is Governor McMaster not swearing in our local law enforcement, right? Because Governor DeSantis is doing that. We don't need to do that here. Our local law enforcement has been apprehending anybody that's illegal and calling ICE in as soon as they commit a crime. We've been doing that already. So I think that's something that sometimes gets overlooked. We see so much on a national level that we don't realize that right here, we're doing it all on our own already.
So let's stay there for a second because I think it's very important. You're at the mercy of the federal government to some degree on immigration policy. Do you have an opinion that unless we act aggressively, quickly, it may be off into the abyss we go? Is that a fair statement from state government, a state like South Carolina?
I think what we owe our citizens is to make sure we're keeping them safe, right? And so, Governor McMaster, way back, and if y'all listen to me on Thursdays on Liz Callaway, we have this conversation an awful lot. And I said, what was really impressive to me is long before people were talking about ICE and what ICE was being allowed to do or not allowed to do, Governor McMaster sat with Chief Keel. This was during the Biden years, and he said, I want you to reach out to all the sheriffs and all the chiefs of police, and I want them to tell you if they see mass drop-offs of illegals, if there's anything that should be catching our attention here in South Carolina. And we want to make sure that we stay on top of that. And so we were taking the precautions that we could as a state, because you're right, immigration is a national issue. But we can work with President Trump to make sure we're doing our part to keep our people safe, to making sure that we're all, and I think that's all of us, right? I talk about Team South Carolina an awful lot. You're all part of Team South Carolina. I think we saw that after 9/11. If you see something, say something, right? That's what we all do. Our law enforcement is here and ready to help as soon as you see something. So make sure you reach out to them. And I think that's the best thing that we can do to mirror what our president is doing at a federal level on immigration. And he's doing great things, Ken. And you know, when I talked to him at that Palmetto Bowl, it was just an idea, it was a concept about deportation. He said, Lieutenant Governor, what do you think about mass deportation? And I said, well, Mr. President, I don't think you have a choice. We don't know who's in our country. We don't know why they're in our country. We don't know, for what reason they came here. I don't think you have a choice. And that's what he ran on. That's what he's been doing. The American people voted him in an overwhelming majority because they wanted our borders closed, they wanted illegals deported, and they wanted an American first agenda, and President Trump is giving us that.
Securing the border seems so commonsensical. I want to read, I don't want to paraphrase because this involves a tragedy. We've seen the horrible tragedies like the murder of USC student Nate Baker, as well as drugs like fentanyl pouring over the border. Do we not understand the severity of consequences if we don't act quickly and promptly?
So Ken, President Trump understands what that means. Unfortunately, the Democrats don't understand what that means, right? They had 4 years in office, and all we heard were excuses from the Democrats, right? The Democrats kept saying, no, we got to pass laws. We just can't do that. We have to, we have to find a new path. We have to get new immigration laws on the books. We're right. All we needed was a new president. We needed a president with a backbone to put America first, to make sure that he was protecting American citizens. That's what he did.
Let's shift gears and go to the income tax of the state of South Carolina. A question had been submitted. There's been a lot of talk about lowering or even eliminating the personal income tax. What can you tell us? Is this going to get done? Would you support it? Where do you stand on eventually get the state income tax to zero?
Well, let me tell you, I'll be very clear. We can do it, and we will do it. We will get South Carolina to a zero state income tax. We are U-Haul's #1 drop-off state, right? We are. The secret's out, people. I can't turn on the close sign. We do not have that here in our state. But, we are now competing against other states. Tennessee, Florida, Texas. They've done it. We can do it. We're going to do it in a few ways. We're going to implement DOGE here in South Carolina. When I mean DOGE, I don't mean, go ahead, we should clap for DOGE. We should clap for efficiency. I mean leveraging technology, making sure we're being efficient, right? We're never going to hire enough people to outpace the growth we have in our state. So we got to do this. And when we do that, we're going to save money. Everybody knows. You know it in your own house, right? If you do things more efficient, there's more money at the end of the month. That's what we have to do. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can cut taxes and be more efficient. And we got to take a really broad, comprehensive look at taxes in general, right? And I'm gonna say this because sometimes I think we don't read the body of the stories as much as we read the headlines, right? And so Liz Calloway asked me this, or it might have been Joey Hudson, because I do a lot of conservative talk radio. And Ken, thank you for doing conservative talk radio, because I really believe that is the best way that you hear exactly what I'm for, and not hearing it from a third party, right, or somebody that's writing an article or whatever. I think it's just a wonderful thing. But if I had $1 for every person that told me, I want our tax structure to be just like North Carolina. Their percentage is low. I like it. Why aren't we doing that? Well, the first bill that was dropped pretty much mirrored North Carolina's tax structure, and nobody wanted it. So what I say is be careful what you wish for, right? Because you just may get it. We are going to do this. We're going to put our heads together. The governor and I have asked for that for years. I feel a lot of momentum in the State House to get it done. I think everybody's going to get creative during the summer, during break. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about it and how we get there. But I do want to point out that in the last now this is the third legislative season, we have cut your taxes. These are the biggest tax cuts we have ever seen in South Carolina, and they've happened, and they're going to continue to go on.
Speaking of tax cuts, the Big Beautiful Bill is a topic of conversation. The historic 2017 tax cuts will be re-implemented or continued throughout the Trump administration. I think this will amount to about a yearly savings of $5,000 for each taxpayer. In essence, what does it mean to have like-minded people in control of the federal government?
Wow, it's a breath of fresh air. Like you asked me earlier, what were things that were different during the Biden administration than there were during the Trump administration? We have a lot of common sense back I think, is it a stretch to say we have a lot more common sense in D.C. than we had the last 4 years? That's for sure. But we have a businessman at the helm who knows that if you want to spark the economy, just leave more money in all your pockets. You'll spend more money. It'll be organic growth. You get useless regulations out of the way for businesses. You let them give them the ability to continue to grow and flourish. And what happens? Organically, people are doing better. It generates more income for state and federal government. And that's how you do it. You will never get ahead of your problems by overtaxing its people. We've seen it. We've tried it. It doesn't work. President Trump knows it doesn't work, and he wants to keep more money in your pocket.
One of the issues that President Trump is encountering is an activist judiciary. Whether it's, we're talking about checks and balance, co-equal branches of government. I'm convinced that Jefferson is buried in a tomb with titanium hinges because he would come out and get all of us for knowing how activist we've allowed judiciary. We read stories about DAs in major cities. And is that a problem in South Carolina? Is there any of that happening in good old red state South Carolina?
Well, what I would say, and I'll be very clear about it, is if you want to come to South Carolina and be a solicitor or a prosecutor, then you better punish everybody to the fullest extent of the law, because we won't have that here in our state. We see what's happening in other states. Our law enforcement working so hard, putting their lives on the line every single day, just to have judges allow bonds and let people go free. That is heartbreaking. That is heartbreaking because they're putting their lives on the line. So what I think is we have a lot of great laws on the books. We need to prosecute to the fullest extent of those laws, and we need to send a clear message. Every one of us that's a parent knows that if people don't see consequences, things get out of control. And that's what we've had happen here in America. I'm proud to say we are not going to have that here in South Carolina. We are not.
In the spirit of supporting law enforcement, lenient sentencing is something I hear a lot, and I'm sure you hear a lot of that. What other sorts of things can we do to support police and law enforcement so they can keep our community safe?
Well, when I talk to our law enforcement, they feel the love here in South Carolina. They really do. It's not like other states where they're looked down upon, they're handcuffed to be able not to really do their job. I mean, when I travel out of state for meetings or whatever I might be going to, and I land in like a Chicago or a New York, I mean, you just see just the look of, I don't know like the best word. It's just sadness, right? And most of them will tell you like, oh, Lieutenant Governor, I got 4 months, 6 days, and 12 hours. And then I'm done. And I'm coming down to a red state because I hear just how good it is. I mean, I hear law enforcement tell me all the time, and thank you to all of you who, when you see a law enforcement officer and you're eating breakfast or lunch or dinner, thank you so much for buying that for them. I mean, that a little bit goes a long way. A little bit goes a real long way.
You would be one of the few candidates that I could have a conversation with about this. In my time in politics, one of the enduring challenges was workforce development. And I was convinced in the political world's catchphrase, let's appoint a committee, let's develop a workforce. Okay, easier said than done. Is that still a challenge in South Carolina? And how can we think out of the box as we prove? We'll get education in a second, but as we our home or invite Boeing to South Carolina and Volvo to South Carolina and BMW in the upstate, I've always felt we failed to meet the mark when it comes to workforce development. Can we provide a quality workforce? Give me some ideas of yours on how we can do better.
So we can do better creating the workforce of tomorrow, and we can do that by taking what President Trump just said. Let's start reappropriating some of these money that are going to big colleges, and let's give them to our technical college system, right? Let's put an emphasis on our technical colleges and why those are the great jobs of tomorrow. And you know, that was music to my ears when President Trump made that statement, because it is something I've been talking about for the 7 years I've been in office. My dad was a tool and die maker. I never thought that gray collar, blue collar, advanced manufacturing was a bad thing. It put a roof over our heads. It put me and my 3 older brothers through college. It wasn't until, and long before I was lieutenant governor, I said to a bunch of friends out at the lacrosse field, I think you and I talked about this once, asking me where my middle son Joey was going to go to college. And I said, well, he's going to go to Greenville Tech. And they all looked at me and was like, oh my God, did he not get into Clemson? What happened? And it took me by surprise, because I was like, no, he doesn't want to go. And there are these great career choices and great career paths that happen through our technical college system. The problem was we didn't know that, right? As all of us who know exactly the great careers that come out of our technical college system, we need to stand up. We need to be their champions. So I have used my 7 years as lieutenant governor to talk about that everywhere, that our technical college system is not a second-tier option. We shouldn't treat it like a second-tier option, and we should encourage our children to go there. And you got a great technical college right here with Horry Georgetown Tech. Dr. Ford does an amazing job there. And I just think so many people, like even my mom. So my mom is 96, and she lives with us. And, you know, she remembers the days, her father was an immigrant. He came here, he worked in the steel mills. My dad was a tool and die maker. He worked on a shop floor. For my grandfather, manufacturing was a dirty, dark, and dangerous thing to do. For my dad, it was kind of uncomfortable because there was no air conditioning on those plant floors. So, you know, people still think of that when they think of manufacturing. They don't think about now when you walk into BMW to make a BMW or Volvo or Boeing or Lockheed Martin, you're not walking in with a toolbox anymore. You're walking in with a laptop. And those are amazing jobs. And I'll tell you, when Lockheed Martin wanted to bring their operations here to South Carolina, that was the first thing they asked me in a dinner in Columbia. They said, Lieutenant Governor, if we bring Lockheed Martin here to make our F-16 Block 70s, how are you going to give us a workforce? Without hesitation, I said, it's our amazing technical college system. That's how you're going to get the workforce you need. And a few years later, when we turned over the first F-16 Block 70s to the generals of Bahrain, that's what the president of Lockheed Martin talked about. That conversation and walking and shaking hands with all the employees that were there, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, with tears in their eyes because of the pride of what they were making. Those planes don't just keep us safe, they keep our allies safe all over the globe. Totally, 100% the sound of freedom.
Do you think we've made headway in addressing the societal stigma that goes along with? I mean, you made a very valid point, and I think it's very encouraging to hear someone in your position to talk about the only path to prosperity is not a 4-year degree.
Exactly.
Do you think other elected officials are doing a good enough job in convincing young people that there is no shame or embarrassment in following another path? I
do, and you know, the governor started the WINS program here in South Carolina. So for any of you that have kids, you know, by the time they get to high school, they know everything. They ain't listening to us, right? If they didn't want to go to college, they didn't go. If they didn't want to go to technical college, they didn't go. So when I became lieutenant governor, there was a very daunting statistic that was given to me. Only 41% of South Carolinians had a secondary degree or certification. And where we were going in growth, we needed to be around 81, 82%. Big gap. That's where the governor said, you know what, let's go to the General Assembly. Let's ask for money. They've given it to us every year. Thank you so much, Val. Every single year for our WINS program. And what we did is we looked at careers that we knew we were going to be short in as far as workforce. And we made sure that we had money going to our technical colleges so people could get those careers to fill those jobs. And today, I'm proud to tell you, 7 years later, we have moved that number from 41% to 51%. So we are making huge strides in that area.
There is no doubt that technology, robotics, automation are heavily influencing manufacturing today. There's a great unknown. If Elon says he doesn't know, the two of us certainly don't. The impact of AI.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're in the beginning stages of trying to better understand its potential, but also the disruptive effect it could have on our economy. You care to comment on where you see the economy and how you see it being influenced or affected by artificial intelligence?
So, when I first heard about AI, just like most of you, the first thing that went into my mind is, oh dear Lord, none of our kids are ever going to learn how to write, right? They're gonna use that technology and they're never going to learn how to write a classroom paper. But then the more you dig into AI is here. That horse has left the barn. Now we need to talk about responsible AI and how we're making sure that we're using good data to get the information we need. I was at MUSC about a year and a half ago talking with doctors that were coming up from Florida, and they were meeting with some doctors that deal in brain cancer at MUSC. And it was shocking to me. It was the first time I said to myself, we have to embrace AI, because that's going to be the medical future of tomorrow. That's how we're going to get personalized medicine. That's how we're going to track data. That's how we're going to look how to really solve the problems that we have. And that's only on the medical front. How do you look through data quickly to find out what's happening? How do we think Doge was able to look through data so quickly? Now, for somebody who owns their own company and who's an accountant, I was shocked that it took Elon Musk to go to DC to find out that we had people 250 years old receiving Social Security checks. And the last I heard, Ken, we're not even 250 years old as a nation yet. So why people weren't using, and this is basic technology, to go and look and find data that didn't look right. AI is going to put us to a whole new level. I think we need to get really smart people getting in front of it. We need to make sure we're going to utilize it. Like I said, we need to utilize it well. We got to make sure the data that we're pulling from is good data. So I am now of the opinion that we can't be afraid of it, because the horse is already out of the barn. We got to figure out how to do it the right way.
We're talking about growing South Carolina, growing its economy. One of the concerns I have, I don't know if you share this concern or not, is the disproportional growth. We're in one of the fastest growing counties in America, not just South Carolina, in one of the fastest growing counties in America. Does a lieutenant governor owe it to the citizenry of South Carolina, as we try to attract talent, as we try to create jobs, to consider? I'll give you a data point, and I'd be interested in your follow-up. If the 2030 census goes as it is planned, 60% of the senators will be from 25% of the counties. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is a problem, and we're having these places void of opportunity. Is it a statewide elected official's job to try and address, I don't want to say the lack of growth in rural South Carolina, but the political realities it creates?
Well, we have been looking at that. And we have been trying to address it. Tim Scott and his opportunity zones, that was one of the big things, right? Is like, how do we incentivize companies that are looking at South Carolina to go into some of those rural areas? Because I'll tell you, if you go to a rural area, it's not going to be a shocker that what you'll hear there is, if you could bring a business there that can put in 50, 75, 100 jobs, it becomes an entire game changer for that area. Because then all of a sudden, houses start going up, and a Walmart will show up. One of the Walmart, just the marketplaces, right? Or you'll get an Aldi, or you'll start to now see growth happening in those areas. That's how you combat food deserts, right? That's how you make education better, because when you can grow an area, people will want to go there. Teachers will want to go there. People will want to build there. And that's how we've seen growth happen. I mean, you don't have to go very far. Just go right down the road to Aner and see what's happening over there, right? Everything is growing out. And we have to make sure that we are looking at the infrastructure in those areas and that they are ready to accept that growth.
Is it time to look at public education in South Carolina holistically as we talk school choice? First of all, are you a proponent, advocate for school choice?
Oh, I am the biggest cheerleader the state has for school choice. I believe parents don't just have the obligation, they have the right to direct their children's education, right? And, this year made big strides towards that, increasing. But I do have to say, the voucher system is the best way to do it. Money following the child. That way parents have the ability to send their kids to a school that is like-minded in their thinking, right? We spend so much time in the General Assembly trying to correct things that are happening in school districts. And you and I think we talked about this one day, by the time you as parents find out that something's happening in your school that you don't like, how much time has gone by? And then by the time you go to the school board and you're not happy with what the school board's saying, then you go to your representatives. And then they take it down to Columbia, and we spend a lot of time trying to get a bill in place. And then by that time, we get that done. 2 years have passed. And then who's ever doing something with a new acronym that we don't like, just change the acronym. And they change the scope of it. If parents could say, I don't like what's happening, and pull their kids out and put them where they like what's happening, then we would spend less time worrying about these issues in Columbia and more time focused on roads and public safety and zero taxes and all the things that you want us working on every single day.
You learned this as I did. We are a state governed largely by the General Assembly.
Yes.
As Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, how have you tried to be effective in advocating for things that you and Governor McMaster believe in, but understanding a lot of that political horsepower, for lack of a better word, resides in the General Assembly?
I think the power in the executive branch in South Carolina comes from the bully pulpit. It comes from making friends in the General Assembly, having a good working relationship where you can work with them and talk to them and tell them, and being out here. I think if there's one thing I've tried to do since I've been Lieutenant Governor, is been accessible. I've tried to be at everything you've invited me to, not just here in Horry County. I'm a statewide elected official. I'm in every county. And I try to listen more than I talk. And then what do I encourage you to do? Send an email to your representative. Send an email to your senator. Be nice. Don't come at them, with pitchforks and torches, but tell them what you think. Because I don't know, I've never heard one time that any representative has ever said, God, I wish those people would stop emailing me. They haven't. And this is something that I've heard since I've been a little kid. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So when there's something you feel passionately about, you tell me, I tell them, you tell them. We're all here to work for you, right? So whatever you want done, we didn't get elected to do what we wanted. We got elected because you sent us up there to do your will. And I have heard that time and time again from everybody in the House and Senate that I talk to a great deal. But the power of the executive branch is being able to work with people, get things done, be able to debate your point. Imagine that, being able to sit across the table and talk to each other and debate your point and bring somebody over to your side. It's a skill these days. Common sense is a superpower, so I guess it works hand in hand. But that's how we do it.
As it relates to dealing with the General Assembly and education, you mentioned they made some progress on school choice, and they did. It's not a slam dunk, but they did make probably more progress than they normally do in a legislative session. In many blue states, they're okay with the school educating and raising the child. Most conservative Republicans believe it's the parent's job to raise the child. Give me kind of your definition of the balance between parental input and the public education system.
Let me be clear. Parents have all the rights in the world to guide their children, to teach their children. They should know everything that's going on in their children's lives. I can't imagine as a parent hearing third hand from somebody that the school is keeping something from me. Who has ever heard of that? My mom is 96 years old. She thinks, like, what is happening in this world where you would think for 1 second A parent shouldn't know what's happening in the lives of their child, that you should keep that from them. I mean, and it doesn't make sense, Ken, because every year I get the same slips I have to fill out. Jackson can't get one Tylenol from the school nurse unless I sign off on it, right? But Jackson should be, this is how crazy this is, right? But Jackson or any other child, Jackson would never do this. I gotta be careful and use my kids, right? That could come back to bite me. But how any parent could be left in the dark about a child trying to change their gender or do something, that is just, it's like bizarro land, Ken. I just don't even understand where that came from. But to be clear, you, the parents, have every single right. You should be able to control everything that happens with your children, period, end of story. There's nothing else to talk about.
One of the big challenges President Trump is dealing with, we talked about activist judiciary a second ago, or the inferior courts judge, the court shopping and venue shopping that leads to the stalling or postponing of some of his orders. I mean, it's not an issue you personally deal with, but as someone in politics, what do you make of these lower court judges thwarting the will of the people by stopping a duly elected president from being allowed to execute his agenda?
You know, again, why is this happening? All judges, so first of all, let me say it this way. Justice should be blind, right? Justice should have no Democrat, Republican. They should live and die by the Constitution. And we have gotten away from that. And that's why things have gotten so out of kilter. And I think when judges don't follow the Constitution, I put my hand on a Bible, just like you did, every 4 years. And I promise to protect and defend the Constitution of this nation and the Constitution of this state. And if I don't do that, then I should full well expect to be kicked out of my position. That's exactly what judges are doing. And if they're not doing that, then they need to be removed. And in South Carolina, I know it's something the governor and I have talked about. We truly believe our judges should be appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate.
One of the conversations that I have with our listeners on the radio is, what does MAGA mean to you? I mean, we argue that we're having a battle for the heart and soul of the Republican Party. That battle's over. I mean, we're a party of MAGA, and I think elected officials like Governor Evette owe it to you to explain in her own words what MAGA means to you. So Make America Great Again began kind of a journey of leading the Republican Party to where it is today. From your words to their ears, what does MAGA mean to Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette?
So MAGA to me means keeping government out of our businesses, keeping government out of our homes, government doing what's best for its people, government taking up for American business and American workers, government making sure that we're energy efficient, government making sure that we're looking 10 years in the future so that we're not caught blindsided. Because in business, I'm telling you, for all the business people out there, we know if you're not looking more than 5 years ahead, you're already looking in the rearview mirror. And I'm saying with government, it needs to be 10 to 15 years. You've got to be looking out. And that's what MAGA means to me. It means to me, and it caught my spirit because of President Trump, it's putting America first, putting its people first, keeping its people safe, and being unapologetic that we are Americans and this is the best damn country in the world to live in. That's what MAGA means to me.
I am through with questions. I'll give you a chance to kind of close us out by speaking directly to the audience about not your political plans and aspirations, but what's next for South Carolina. What do you perceive to be our challenges? What excites you about being part of the solutions?
So first of all, I want to thank you all so much for coming. This is great. This is the second town hall I've done. I was up in Grille a couple weeks ago, and it was great to hear from people. It's always great to hear from people. Shake hands and say hello and say thank you, because this is truly an honor to be able to serve you. I'm excited for South Carolina because we have a lot of great things that are happening, right? We passed a big energy bill. That energy bill is going to hopefully resurrect V.C. Sumner, and it's not going to be at the taxpayer's discretion. Everything I'm hearing about, it's going to be private equity money. But let me tell you, when we become energy efficient, when we become an energy producer, what we're going to do is we're going to keep South Carolina growing for a long time. Because there is talk that we could have 6 new reactors in this state. And that is amazing. We're going to work hand in hand. So you talk about energy. I want to tell you a story because I think stories are great. And I think it gives you an idea of what businesses were facing during the Biden administration. Keeping on the energy, the Biden administration cut off natural gas. And that was horrible and it was devastating. But everybody just knew it from, a 1,000-foot view. Well, I was at CMC in Casey, South Carolina. And we had a round table. It was a manufacturing recycling round table, and they recycle steel. And I asked them how everything was going, and they said, well, let me tell you, when the Biden administration shut off natural gas, it increased our energy costs $1 million a month. $1 million a month. As an accountant, I almost rolled off my chair. $12 million a year impacting your bottom line that you didn't know. We can't operate like that. So when Secretary Zeldin was here, the Vice President was here a few weeks ago, Secretary Zeldin was here, and we were at Nucor Steel. And I said to Secretary Zeldin, in the spirit of MAGA, I said, we're passing a big, beautiful energy bill. I said, what are you going to be able to do to give us relief? Because we can produce energy, but we got to be able to transfer energy to where it has to go. And that's where federal regulations come into play. And he said to me, he goes, whew, Lieutenant Governor, President Trump gave me 10 weeks to cut regulations in that sector. And I said, well, he doesn't sleep, so you probably shouldn't sleep either. That's okay. I'm all for that. So I'm very excited about that. With what President Trump is doing at a federal level, turning on dispatchable energy, and what we can be doing here in South Carolina, increasing baseload energy, it is big. And what we're doing in cybersecurity here is amazing. I did a ribbon cutting in Aiken just last week where we're putting the military, USC Aiken, we're putting our SC Guard. It was one of the biggest projects that the military has done, completely focused on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity and AI, because we want to keep our infrastructure safe. That's what we need to do. So it's those kind of things that get me really excited. It's those kind of quirky business things that I see making South Carolina's growth just over the top and unlimited. And seeing what we're going to do in education. Because I do believe that we will get to full school choice here in South Carolina. And when we do that, we're going to see educational outcomes soar. And when you match unleashing energy with creating the workforce of tomorrow, with increasing the outcomes in education, and first and foremost, giving everybody hope. Because when you have hope, nothing will stop you. And that's what I see. That's what I'm excited about. That's what I like to talk about. If you follow me on social media, if you hear me talk, I try to tell you about all the great things. Because you could turn on the news at any minute and see about all the horrible things that are happening in the world. And sometimes I think you can't see the forest through the trees about what's happening here in South Carolina. So when you get down about something, I'm going to close with this. South Carolina's fingerprints are all over the globe. Right? We make more BMWs here in South Carolina than anywhere in the world. Those are South Carolina's fingerprints. We make F-16 Block 70s right here in South Carolina. We are keeping us and our allies safe all over the globe. South Carolina's fingerprints. 28 boat builders selling our boats to people like the Prince of Qatar. Scout Boats was making 2 huge boats for the Prince of Qatar. Those are South Carolina's fingerprints. In Aiken, South Carolina, and I'll end with this because I could keep you here for 2 hours talking to you about all the things that we do and send across the globe. But think about this. In Aiken, South Carolina, we have the last glass fiber weaving manufacturer in this country. If anything happened to that business, we would be 100% relying on China for all the glass fiber weaving that goes in every cell phone that y'all hold, which goes on every plane we make, that goes into technology that we use in our homes every day. That is South Carolina's fingerprints. We are filling the gap on a national security problem right here in our state. So I am proud of this state. I am proud of all of you, because if you showed up here tonight, you're the engaged people, right? You're the ones that are calling your friends, making sure things are going right, emailing your House reps, staying involved. You guys are the backbone of the Republican Party. And thank you so much for caring enough to come out and hear me talk and listen to Ken Ard. You should definitely listen to him. We got a lot of great conservative talk radios going on here in South Carolina. But thank you. Thank you enough for loving this country as much as I do. And may God bless you, and may God bless the great state of South Carolina.